There are some players that you just can't trust anymore, whether or not they screwed you over or you saw them screw your league mates over in fantasy football, whether it's guys that are in their third year or maybe even their second year, or some savvy veterans who had long time fantasy football success. There are some guys that me and Bryce will not be drafting this year in fantasy football, and we're here to provide you 7 names that you should be staying away from this year in order to claim that fantasy football trophy this season. What's going on, everybody? I'm Blitz Link. I'm here with Bryce DeGroat. We are talking all the players we do not want to touch anymore in fantasy football. It's that time of year. We're ripping out these type of videos. And let's just start with one of the most, talked about guys last season, Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars. My biggest thing with BTJ is, I don't think it's a talent thing. He still separated at a really strong level last season, was open a lot. His catch rate dropped by nearly 30%, and his numbers took a massive dip with that. Even worse, this team traded for Jacoby Myers at the deadline. He became their most consistent receiver. And then Parker Washington down the stretch and in the postseason really, turned it to another level. Those were two guys on an 800 plus yard pace. That is not good for Brian Thomas Jr., as it really does feel like he is the third wide receiver in that pecking order right now for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is a far cry from his top 5 wide receiver performance as a rookie. I don't know if I can remember a player that had this much excitement heading into year 2 and the disappointment he had, and now he's just kind of off my fantasy radar long term. And this is even without Travis Hunter, being a wide receiver for this Jacksonville Jaguars team.
Yeah, man, I 100% agree with you. And the thing too is that people are kind of overlooking is they talked about Travis Hunter being primarily a corner and being filtered in as a wide receiver. We saw the flashes he has at the wide receiver position. If he can play that level when he gets to his minimum snaps, it's going to be hard to take him off the field. So who even knows if he is the wide receiver 3? If Hunter comes in and makes a name for himself and like, oh, we need reps of him at wide receiver more than we expected, BTJ is the 3 or the 4 at that point. This is a lot of mouths to feed, and I agree with that. And the film doesn't lie; he was scared of the football this year. So, um, yeah, and I'm gonna follow that up with another wide receiver too, and I'm gonna go Calvin Ridley, a guy that I was actually really high on heading into the year. And he made me look like an absolute fool, finishing as the wide receiver 114. Started off the year terribly, didn't look good whatsoever. Then he got hurt, played a little bit, looked terrible again, hurt. It was between terrible, hurt, and now he's pretty much over 30 years old. You have concerns with the young quarterbacks still that Cam Ward looked good, but didn't look good at times. There's a lot of question marks there, especially in the future. And just with a team spiraling like Tennessee, I want nothing to do with a guy that just let me down, that's only getting older and plays in a pretty questionable offense.
Yeah, no, and I think, Tennessee is one of those teams we look at this offseason that could have maybe the most significant moves in terms of playmakers at the wide receiver position, tight end, running back position. That's a change between any other NFL team. This team clearly needed weapons for Cam Ward to have success, and they did not have it in his first year in Tennessee. With a new coaching staff, I know Robert Saleh is gonna be targeting defense, but he gets Brian Dable there, who has had a pass happy scheme. I know Calvin Ridley is coming back. He's under contract, but he's just not the same player. And if we expect him to be a wide receiver 1 for this team and potentially a strong flex option in fantasy, I don't think that's the case. There's a real possibility that this team goes wide receiver with their first pick, or even early second round, or is in the market for what some of these top guys available. Maybe an AJ Brown reunion, maybe Tyreek Hill comes over. Like, there's a lot of different options that turn Calvin Ridley into a target, volume meter type of guy in fantasy, to a unrelevant wide receiver for borderline waiver wire guy. And that seems like where he's trending, and the injuries are only something that adds to that case as well. We got 2 quarterbacks for you guys next. Jalen Hurts is my mention. And while I think Jalen Hurts is still going to be a productive quarterback in fantasy football, he averaged 18.7 points per game. That's not bad by any means. This is more the fact that Jalen Hurts is one of these quarterbacks that we can't be reaching for a quarterback advantage in these first few rounds. Now, we relied on a lot of tush push touchdowns for Jalen Hurts, and that's why we warranted his draft position this past season. I expect him to go around a similar price point this year. We cannot be paying that price for Jalen Hurts. His tush push touchdowns took a significant decrease. His rushing took a decrease. And this is a guy that's really struggling to pass the ball consistently. And I know this team made offensive coordinator changes and likely we'll see a bump on the offensive side of the ball. But if you are going to pay for a quarterback that early in your draft, you go get Josh Allen, you go get Lamar Jackson. You don't settle for Jalen Hurts in the fourth round or the early fifth round when there's so much value at different positions there.
Love it, man. I'm actually, even off the fantasy side, I'm not a Hurts guy at all. So I don't think I've ever drafted him in fantasy, and I don't plan on ever drafting him in fantasy. But like you said, following up with another quarterback, I'm going Kyler Murray. And I will say, to kind of play devil's advocate on this, if for some reason, somehow, some way he gets traded to the Vikings and takes that starting role, I will forget what I said and I'll be back on the Kyler Murray train in that offense. But whether he's a Cardinal, whether he's a Jet, whether he's a Dolphin, he is not on my radar. Kyler in 2021 started off so good. He was literally at the top of the market, averaging 22 points a game. And ever since then, it's been downhill 18 points a game, 18 points a game, 17 points a game. This year, 15 points a game. It's just been a downward spiral for Kyler. The rushing upside hasn't been there like it used to. And I just don't really know how his future is going to pan out. Like he had a good offense in Arizona this year and couldn't do much with it. So I don't want anything to do with Kyler unless he's a Minnesota Viking, but I don't see that happening either.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility that Kyler is on the move. There was a report that him and the general manager haven't even talked since the season ended. And obviously, we know that Kyler Murray was kind of softly benched towards the end of the year for Jacoby Brissett as they let him get healthy. Mike LaFleur is definitely a great hire, I think, for this team on the offensive side of the ball. It's going to be a little bit different than Drew Petzing and what he brought. I just, Kyler's had so much up and downs throughout his career. And, in fantasy specifically, he's had those boom performances. Then he's had those really low lows that have cost you a lot of weeks. So I agree with you that Kyler Murray, while he does provide a ceiling, it's just not worth it anymore at this point for, to go have that Kyler Murray upside in your fantasy drafts unless he has a change of scenery. My next player is a Lions running back, and no, it's not Jahmyr Gibbs. That guy's an absolute animal. It is the other guy, David Montgomery, who may not be a Detroit Lion for too much longer. This is more the fact that David Montgomery showed clear signs of regression last season as the running back, and he wasn't as effective and efficient for a Detroit Lions team that saw a little bit of regression on their offensive line. Monty has been really good because he's an early down back, scored a ton of touchdowns in Detroit for the previous two seasons, and was efficient behind that offensive line. Last season, completely opposite, lost a ton of touches to Jahmyr Gibbs overall. I don't see a situation where he walks into the NFL or for any of these teams in the NFL and has a massive workload like a true bell cow RB1. That is really concerning for me. We paid a RB2 price for David Montgomery entering last season. Obviously, he's going to be discounted, but he feels like one of those high end RB3s that are a trap because he doesn't really have a ceiling this year.
Yeah, dude, I love that as well. I mean, you kind of hit it on the head. He was pretty inefficient, didn't look good, and that was with a great offensive line. If he hits the market and goes somewhere else, yeah, he might be a little bit of the workhorse back compared to what he was in Detroit, but you're not going to get an O line like that, and he's only getting older. So I like that pick for sure. And then following that up with my running back, a guy even older than him, I'm going Alvin Kamara, a guy I actually drafted in quite a bit of leagues this year, and I will not be doing it again. And that's for a couple different reasons. One, he's not the same Alvin Kamara that I thought he was going to be. Receiving upside was kind of his bread and butter in fantasy. That wasn't really the case this year. The this whole Saints offense wasn't really ran that smoothly. They didn't run the ball through him, and even when he was healthy, he wasn't on the field as much as I wanted him to. I mean, Devin Neal, that rookie, bad to be in year two, saw a lot of work. So really, just between the questionable offense, him aging, like the workload not really being there, I don't want Alvin Kamara. I banked on him because of receiving upside, and once he didn't get that, I pretty much had to hit the dip button really quick.
Yeah, no, I think with Alvin Kamara, your silver lining is he stays in New Orleans and they don't pair a significant like I think a David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara pairing in New Orleans is a realistic thing for them if they decide to not go, a Jeremiah Love route with their draft pick or, a top end free agent available this offseason. I could see them settling with a veteran tandem to help Tyler Shuck this year. And, maybe both those guys have RB3 value at that point. But Kamara's a guy that's, been rumored to be a cut candidate or a trade candidate. Once again, even though he stated that he wants to stay in New Orleans, he's not the same player as he once was. And while he's flashed moments, of his old self, it's been heavily reliant on, dump downs and, passes designed to him. He's not going to get enough volume. And it truly feels like if you're outside of a PPR league like Alvin Kamara, there's no reason you should be drafting him during the 2026 season. And then the final player on this list, a player that, I was pretty notorious on calling last season as a bust because of his touchdown regression coming, Mark Andrews. Among tight ends last season, Andrews, this is what he ranked: 23rd in fantasy points per game, 25th in receiving yards per game, 20th in targets, 15th in touchdowns, and 30th in yards per reception. Bryce, I don't know math very well, but those don't seem like the best numbers overall in fantasy for a guy that was drafted as a top 8 tight end last year. And Mark Andrews holds a ton of name value, and I do still think he holds a valuable role for the Baltimore Ravens. They clearly believe so because they extended him last offseason. But in terms of fantasy production, this season was an absolute mess for him, and I do think Lamar Jackson being healthy for a full year would have increased those numbers, but the inconsistency is legit. If he's not scoring touchdowns, he's not a productive option at tight end. And while it feels like we're entering a year in 2026 where there's a lot of good tight end options that you can target in the middle rounds and the early rounds of your draft next year.
Love it, dude. I'm sound like a broken record, but I'm right there with you, especially of how this tight end position is kind of looking right now. Like a lot of young studs. Then you got Sadiq coming out of college, who, if he hits a nice landing spot, he's going to be up and coming too. There's also other rookies. We saw what they did this year in their rookie season. I just don't want Mark Andrews, especially if you can guarantee that he's going to give me 12 plus touchdowns, then we can talk. But the TD,
there ain't no guarantee with that.
Yeah, the TD regression was too large, and he doesn't produce if he doesn't score, and that's too much of a risk I don't want to take.
100%. Well, guys, those are the players that we are absolutely avoiding at all costs during our fantasy football drafts this year. Drop a comment down below which of these guys you're avoiding, or if we left out any sort of players on this list. Make sure you guys stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter for NFL Combine content throughout the week. We're in Indianapolis, and we're breaking news from you guys right here from Indy. Hit that subscribe button for more Blitz fantasy football content. Me and Bryce will catch you guys next time.